They forged you in silence when the world turned its back, when voices that once spoke your name chose instead to whisper your downfall. You didn't rise from hope or light, you rose from the wreckage. From the ashes of every "you're not enough," every betrayal stitched like barbed wire into your spine. They thought they buried you. They didn't know you were the ground shifting beneath their feet. You were never broken, you were tempered. Hardened in the furnace of abandonment, carved into something colder, something clearer, something unstoppable. You are not revenge. You are the echo after the storm, the breath they hold when your name resurfaces. You walk with the quiet confidence of someone who's already won, because victory isn't loud. It doesn't need to scream. It shows up dressed in your resilience, in your rise, in their fear. They wanted a reaction. What they got was evolution. They didn't just underestimate you. They wagered everything on your destruction, assuming pain would be enough to tear you limb from soul. They watched with amusement as your foundation cracked beneath betrayal's weight, as if their knives wouldn't dull in your back. They mistook collapse for defeat. But they never understood the truth you'd learn in your darkest hours. There is a kind of power that only comes from being broken beyond recognition. Because that kind of breaking, it doesn't leave you shattered. It reforges you. There's a silence you reach at the edge of pain. A silence so absolute it's almost peaceful. That's where you went when the world buried you. Past the noise. Past the chaos. Deep into the hollow, where the echoes of every betrayal sang you to sleep. And in that place, you didn't beg for light. You didn't scream for rescue. You embraced the void. Because real transformation doesn't come dressed in comfort. It comes when you've lost everything you thought mattered. When the people you trusted toss your worth into the dirt like it meant nothing. And you're left staring into a mirror, too tired to pretend, too empty to lie. That's when it starts. The rebuild. Slow. Gritted. Quietly violent. You gathered the pieces. Every broken promise. Every laugh behind your back. Every moment you were made to feel lesser, smaller, forgotten. You stacked them like bricks and built yourself an altar. Not one of worship, one of revenge. Not the petty kind. Not the loud, chaotic, theatrical kind. No, yours was surgical. Precise. You became the embodiment of survival sharpened into vengeance. They thought pain would weaken you. They didn't realize pain was your forge. You stopped speaking in hopes. You started speaking in actions. Your silence wasn't surrender. It was transformation. Every minute you spent in that silence, they wrote you off as broken. They celebrated your disappearance like a victory. But you weren't gone. You were becoming. And when you returned, they didn't recognize you. Because the softness was stripped away. The old you, the one who forgave too quickly, gave too easily, trusted too blindly, was buried in the dirt they tried to leave you in. And what rose from that soil wasn't just stronger. It was dangerous. Not because you sought to hurt anyone, but because you stopped needing to be understood. Stop needing to explain your pain. Stop needing them. And in that indifference, you became untouchable. They called you cold. You smiled. They called you cruel. You stayed silent. Because the truth isn't in their words, it's etched into the scars you wear like armor. You didn't become the villain. You became the truth. The undeniable, inescapable result of their actions. They built you. And now, they fear the shape they created. Because monsters don't wear claws and fangs. They wear focus. They wear control. And above all, they wear clarity, the kind that comes after the storm, when you realize that no one is coming to save you, and you no longer want them to. You became that clarity. The storm doesn't apologize for the flood. The flame doesn't explain why it burns. You don't ask for understanding. You offer none. Because they were never trying to see you. They were trying to break you. And they failed. Now, they stare at what's left, and all they see is a reflection of their own failure staring back, unflinching, relentless, alive. This isn't a resurrection. This is the unveiling of what was always buried beneath the surface, the version of you that doesn't flinch, doesn't bend, doesn't break. The version of you that cannot be undone. And this is only the beginning. They will say they didn't mean to hurt you. They'll tilt their heads, furrow their brows, wear sympathy like a mask stitched too tightly across their regretless faces. They will tell stories drenched in convenience, crafted recollections where you were never broken, where your pain was an overreaction, where their hands stayed clean while you bled out behind closed doors. They'll beg the world to remember a version of the past that never existed. But you remember. Because the truth wasn't written in ink, it was etched into your bones, burned into the back of your throat every time you swallowed your voice to keep the peace. They drained you. Not all at once, no. They were surgeons of slow destruction. Every favor twisted into obligation. Every vulnerability repurposed into ammunition. Every I need you slowly mutated into I own you. And when you were dry, emotionally bankrupt, spiritually hollow, they didn't grieve the loss. They didn't mourn what they'd taken. They walked away like you were just another phase. Another experiment. Another story to tell. Later, when they played victim and needed a villain to point at. But here's what they never understood: you owed them nothing. Not an explanation. Not forgiveness. Not another piece of your soul. And certainly not your rage. They expected fire. They expected fallout. They expected you to come crawling, eyes wild, fists clenched, demanding an answer that never would have satisfied the ruin they left behind. But instead, you gave them silence. Because somewhere in your descent, somewhere between the scream you couldn't let out and the tears that refused to fall, you found something colder than hate, sharper than fury. You found indifference. They'll say you changed. But what really happened was far more terrifying. You stopped caring. You stopped holding space for their chaos. You let go of the need to be seen, the obsession with being understood, The compulsion to explain that no, you weren't overreacting, you were bleeding. They don't get access to you anymore. That door isn't closed, it's sealed. You've redefined your power. You no longer chase closure like a starving dog chasing bones. You realize now that closure is a cage. It keeps you chasing the same questions, hoping the people who broke you can offer the blueprint to rebuild. But they were never architects of healing. They only know destruction. The day you looked back and felt nothing, that was the day you were free. That's the beauty of indifference. Not the fake kind, the kind people post online with gritted teeth and performative detachment. No, yours is real. The kind that lives in your marrow. The kind that lets you sleep. The kind that turns your silence into a mirror they can't escape. Because they hear it. In the echoes of your absence. In the way your name becomes a ghost in rooms they enter. In the quiet that crushes them when you don't flinch, don't explain, don't even blink. They'll call you heartless now. Let them. Because your heart isn't gone, it's just no longer up for auction. And your success, it won't scream. It won't flash. It'll appear in headlines, whispered in envy, murmured in circles they no longer belong to. Your name, your rise, your glow, it will haunt them in ways revenge never could. Because this is the truth they can't outrun. You didn't win by destroying them. You won by refusing to be destroyed. And they'll relieve that loss every time they remember what you were, what they had access to, and realize they'll never touch that light again. Not because you're hiding it, but because it no longer exists for them. And from that silence, from that nothingness, you built an empire they can't breathe in. You are the void they created. You are the consequence they never calculated. And this indifference, this quiet peace born from devastation, it's not the end. It's the prelude. You never wanted justice. Justice is a currency for the hopeful. A system built to make pain feel purposeful, to tame the unruly ache of being wronged. But you're beyond hope. You're past pain. Justice is too small for you now. It begs for recognition. It waits for validation. It asks permission to exist. You don't ask anymore. What you want can't be contained in a courtroom or a confession. What you want is victory, raw, unfiltered, undeniable. Not the kind they clap for. The kind that speaks in silence. The kind that levels buildings and shatters legacies, not with fists, but with presence. Because victory doesn't scream. It arrives. And you're not coming. You're already here. They expect anger. Of course they do. It's predictable. It's safe. Rage is familiar, it's what they wanted from you. Something loud, emotional, wild enough that they could still pretend they mattered. Anger makes you look like you care. And if you care, then maybe they're still important. Maybe they still own a part of you. But you've outgrown rage. Rage is a leash. One tug and you're back where they want you, reactive, exposed, enslaved to the narrative they spun around you. But you've seen through that game. You've tasted the truth that lives beneath the urge to fight. Reacting is still giving them space inside your head. So you starved the fire. Not out of weakness, but out of precision. Because you know now, real power isn't in exploding. It's in observing. It's in watching them flail in your absence. In letting them spin their victory stories while you sit at the center, unmoved, detached, calculating. You're not the storm anymore. You're the atmosphere. And when they least expect it, when they've relaxed into the illusion of triumph, you strike not with vengeance, but with success that suffocates. That reminds them you never disappeared. You simply stepped aside long enough to let them expose themselves. You became the shadow they forgot to look for. The echo in the room after they thought the music stopped. They don't see you coming because they still don't know what you are. They think you are still playing the same game. But you burn that board. You don't retaliate. You redesign. You let them believe they hold the strings. Let them dangle their false power, intoxicated by control. You nod. You smile. You let their delusion expand until it's too swollen to stand. And then, quietly, you dismantle the stage beneath their feet. Not with fury. With precision. Not with chaos. With command. Because when you speak now, when you move, they feel the gravity shift. You don't fight for space. You become the space. That's what victory looks like. Not trophies. Not applause. But the realization on their faces when they see you in the places they told you you'd never reach. When your name becomes synonymous with resilience. When they whisper, not shout, because they know you're listening even when they can't see you. You don't wear your vengeance. You wear peace that hums like a thread beneath every step you take. They underestimated you. Good. They thought you'd crumble. Perfect. They celebrated your failure like a funeral. Let them. Because now, the quiet haunts them. The one where your voice used to be. The silence you carved with your exit, it follows them. It poisons their victories, haunts their mirrors, infects their memories. They wanted a reaction. What they got was ascension. And the most brutal truth of all, you were never trying to win their game. You were always building your own. And now that it's ready, the world will learn the difference between success and dominance. They crowned themselves kings of illusions, perched high atop monuments of manipulation, convincing the world and themselves that they had won. That your silence was submission. That your exile was evidence of failure. But they never understood that victory built on deceit is already crumbling the moment it's declared. They mistook your retreat for surrender. But what you were really doing was studying, unlearning every myth they ever forced into your bloodstream. Peeling back the layers of their lies until you found yourself buried beneath 1,000 false narratives. The truth didn't rescue you. You resurrected it. And now they see it. Not in your words, but in your distance. Not in confrontation, but in how peacefully you stopped explaining yourself. And it terrifies them. Because their throne it was made of your loyalty. Their power it leaned entirely on your silence. Their pride it only stood because you bent. You never needed them. Not the way they convinced you you did. Not the way they needed you desperately, quietly, parasitically. You were the current beneath their calm, the fire behind their glow, the stability they feigned as their own. And now that you are gone, they're adrift in the wreckage of their own fabrication, grasping for something real in the echo of your absence. They are nothing without you. Because what they feared most wasn't losing control over you, it was the world learning they never had it. They built entire identities around the illusion that they made you. That your strength was a debt owed to their cruelty. That your resilience was forged in their brilliance. But now, left to their own devices, the facade is cracking. Their empire of deceit has no foundation. Their narrative has no legs. And in the stillness, in the silence, in the haunted realization that you were the storm they tried to trap in a cage, they crumble. Because they didn't underestimate you. They misunderstood you. They thought control was a chain you wouldn't cut. That guilt was a leash you wouldn't drop. But control is a game for the insecure. And you evolved past games. Past their need for dominance. Past their hunger for praise dressed as manipulation. You stopped trying to be understood. You stopped performing. And in that stillness, you reclaimed your essence. Not the one they dressed in expectations, in obligations, in conditions. Know your real essence. The one they tried to dim. The one that kept breaking through despite their best attempts. That version of you doesn't kneel, doesn't beg, doesn't linger in rooms that echo with erasure. That version of you leaves. And they weren't ready for that. They were prepared for war, but not for indifference. They were waiting for rage, not for peace. They had defenses for your fire but no antidote for your freedom. Now they watch, shadows wrapped around their feet, staring into the world you built from the ashes of what they tried to kill. And it haunts them. Not because you retaliated, but because you didn't. And that's the closing note of the symphony, not destruction, not noise, but distance. And the next chapter? It doesn't include them. It starts with the light you carry now, untouched, unbothered, unforgettable. You were never their victim. You wore pain, yes, but not as chains. You carried betrayal in your chest like a second heartbeat, a constant reminder of the venom they fed you with every smile, every false embrace, every manufactured promise that crumbled the second you leaned on it. But you never begged. You never surrendered. Even on the days your hands were shaking and your voice caught in your throat, you never gave them the truth they were hoping to extinguish. Because you weren't broken. You were becoming. They tried to bury you, convinced the silence of the grave would be enough to erase you from the story. What they didn't realize was that you weren't the end. You were the root. Beneath the soil of their cruelty, you evolved. Not in sunlight, not in nourishment. You grew in darkness, in isolation, in rage thick enough to choke on, in nights so long they swallowed your name. And still, you grew. They watered you with neglect, but it only made your roots deeper, unkillable. They tried to silence you, but your silence, it never meant defeat. It was the inhale before the flood, the restraint before the strike. They thought screams made power louder. But what they never learned is that silence, true silence, is what echoes longest. That's what you became. An echo. A presence they couldn't erase. A weight they carried with them in rooms you never entered. You weren't loud, but you were felt. In the tightness in their chest when your name was mentioned. In the way their laughter caught in their throats when they remembered what they had lost and what you had become. Because they didn't break you. They refined you. They don't understand the consequence of creating something so unrelenting it stops needing affirmation. You don't need the world to applaud. You don't need revenge to validate your pain. You don't even need them to admit what they did. Because they are no longer a chapter in your story. They are the ash beneath your rise. And now you rise. Not as a phoenix from fire, but as a storm from silence. Your ascent doesn't come with flames. It comes with force, with gravity, with a terrifying calm. Because this version of you doesn't look back. This version doesn't break down. This version builds. You walk differently now, not like someone healing, but like someone who knows. There's a steadiness in you that wasn't there before. Not because you've forgotten what they did, but because you've outgrown the need to be damaged by it. You no longer fear your scars. You wear them like medals. You no longer run from your past. You stand on it like a throne forged from every failure they celebrated too early. You are not here to prove anything. You are here to exist unapologetic, unrelenting, unshaken. They thought they could shape your story, but the story was never theirs to write. You've taken back the pen, carved your truth into the spine of time itself. And now they watch. Not because they want to, but because they can't look away. The same way you can't look away from a force of nature tearing through everything built on lies. You were never just rising. You were returning to your rightful place. Not above them, not beside them, but beyond them. And this is not a conclusion. This is not the soft landing they expected. This is the dawn. This is the reckoning. And it carries your name. You've walked through fire and didn't flinch. You stared into the abyss and built a home there. This isn't just survival, this is domination. Every scar you carry is a warning. Every triumph you claim is a reckoning. This is where pain becomes power. Where silence becomes strategy. Where the darkness isn't feared, it's mastered. You are not their victim. You are their consequence. And this is only the beginning. Welcome to Dark Triumphs.